We are joined live now from Israel with IDF international spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus. Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, pleasure to have you back on our program tonight. I appreciate you making the time.
Thank you for having me again.
I'm just going to pick up actually where my last interview left off. We were talking to the uncle of a Canadian who was killed by Hamas. They just discovered that she was not, in fact, held hostage. She was killed. I thought I'd take the opportunity to start off actually and just ask you about the hostage situation as it stands right now. Are there still, do you understand, 199 hostages? And what is happening at this point to try and secure their release?
Yes, the number remains the same. This unimaginable astronomical number of 199 Israelis, or 199 people that were abducted. It is extremely sensitive. It's a challenge that we have never faced before. Many things I cannot say, but I can say this. First and foremost, in terms of commitment, we will bring the people back home. That has been said by the Prime Minister, by our Chief of Staff, and by everybody that we will not rest and no resource will be spared until everybody is back in Israel. In addition to that, I can share that there is a national task force which is pooling all of the resources of the intel community that are now focused mostly on this specific task to understand, and this has already been established now, who is being held hostage, and then to understand where they are, and most importantly, how to get them out. Because of the sensitivity, I can't elaborate further where we stand and the main challenges we face. I can only say that we in the IDF, our embrace and warmest feelings of sympathy go out to the families, both of soldiers and civilians, and we will do everything it takes to get them back.
I watched an interview, and I do understand the sort of operational considerations, but maybe more broadly speaking, I watched an interview, I believe it was on NBC News this morning, in which an official who represented Hamas essentially said, if airstrikes stopped on Gaza, they would release those hostages. Do you believe that?
I don't believe a single word coming out of a Hamas terrorist. They are a bunch of cowards and liars, murderers, rapists, and people who mutilate bodies and do some of the worst atrocities. They are vile. So I do not believe anything that they say. I can only believe actions when I see them and when they are confirmed. And I think that the best way for that vile terrorist to save himself and the others, and save a lot of civilian lives in Gaza, would be to unconditionally return safely all of the Israeli hostages held, to surrender unconditionally him and all of the other murderers of the Hamas terrorist organization. Many civilian lives will be saved in Gaza, and it will save us the trouble of getting in there and getting him. If they'll do that, that'll be a smart move. If not, we will get in there and we will find each and every last Hamas commander, and we will dismantle their military organization.
Lieutenant Colonel, it's been just over a day since that explosion in the area of the hospital in Gaza City. I watched your interview last night on CNN shortly thereafter. And you talked about how you were confident at that time that Israel was not behind whatever happened. And obviously a lot has come to light since then, and you have produced some of the intelligence and evidence to that point. How confident are you at this point, nearly, I guess it's 24 hours after that initial interview, that it was not Israel behind this?
I am as confident as I was when I first faced the camera a few hours ago yesterday. I am more confident because now we have the light of day. And now we have the Palestinian photographers and some other media outlets going to the place, taking footage of the burnt parking space and the surroundings, and verifying and independently corroborating what we said last night, just 4 hours after the explosion. The explosion was not caused by an IDF bomb, because IDF bombs create very large craters and they do not create fires. In the parking ground, a small crater, which corresponds exactly with the types of craters that we see in Israel when rockets land and explode in Israel, and fire, which also happens many, many times when rockets explode on the ground. So everything, if anything, just is supporting our claims and the evidence that we provided. And frankly, I don't think that there should even be so much of a discussion. Here, on one hand, we have a terrorist organization which lies, murders, rapes, and brutalizes women, children, and men, who has a long track record of lying and bullying the international media and executing journalists in Gaza and bullying them. And their word is taken at face value, and we have to prove that they're wrong. I think it should be the other way around. And I don't think that there even should be a contest, as in, or a contest of parity between what Hamas says and what we say, especially not when it's after 4 hours of investigation and we say that this was based on the highest level or approved at the highest level in Israel.
I certainly, Lieutenant Colonel, take your point about that, and that there should be the highest degree of skepticism pointed in the direction of any claim coming from Hamas. Initially, and I know that you'll say that there is much sort of interwoven between the health authority, for example, or various authorities in Gaza and Hamas, but the initial information did come from the health authority there. And I ask this with as much sensitivity as I can, because I do understand that Hamas instigated this. But the intelligence in Israel failed to see it coming. The IDF has been heavily criticized from Israelis about the speed with which you responded. So I put to you that there is some skepticism about what you're putting forward, and I completely understand the distinguishment you're making between Hamas and your own forces. But there is some skepticism and some questions being asked because of that. I have read many Israelis say, why should we trust the response of the IDF when they weren't there as immediately as they should have been just following the attack? So I ask that with, again, great sensitivity and respect.
Yes, I understand your question and where it comes from. And let me say this. One failure doesn't make a complete organization a failure. Yes, the IDF failed, not Hamas, and not to identify what the rocket is and what the missile is. The IDF failed on a much more substantial level to defend Israeli civilians. And Hamas were able to take advantage of that and kill Israeli men, women, and children. We have horrible first-hand accounts of rape, mutilation, and all of the things that we unfortunately have been forced to talk about and endure in Israel over the last 12 days. The fact that the IDF didn't prevent that doesn't mean that we don't have a tremendous intelligence collection machine that is working overtime in striking Hamas and its targets. And a good example, just from a few hours ago, yesterday, a senior Hamas official, a military commander who was responsible for central Gaza and a liaison with the other terrorist organizations in Gaza, he was killed. This is a man who was in hiding. He knew he had a target on his back. He was killed because we targeted him. How did we target him? With intelligence, the same type of intelligence that I brought before the world and showed and substantiated our claims with. So if anybody wants an answer whether or not Israeli intelligence is still good, ask Hamas leaders and how many times they've seen the light of day since they went into their tunnels. They're afraid because they know that we have the intelligence and the capacity to strike them.
Part of the reason that it was difficult to get accurate information, and I'm not absolving the media of guilt here, but is because there's a lack of ability to actually report on what's happening in Gaza because it is so closed off. President Biden was just touching down from his visit in Israel, and he indicated that there's some sort of agreement between Israel and Egypt, perhaps facilitated by the U.S., to allow for some aid to get into Gaza. I think he said something in the neighborhood of 20 trucks. Can you confirm any of that?
So what I can confirm is that the Israeli cabinet, at the request of President Biden, has indeed approved humanitarian aid to be entered into the Gaza Strip from Egypt, not from Israel, from Egypt, and that aid shall be received only by civilians, not by Hamas. If Hamas will try to steal it, as they have stolen fuel from UN headquarters, UNRWA headquarters in Gaza, which was documented and reported by UNRWA themselves, if Hamas will try to do so, we will strike it, and it won't reach anybody. We have also coordinated a humanitarian zone in the northwestern part of Khan Yunis, close to the sea. It's an area called El Muassi, and to that area, humanitarian aid will be delivered as per our guidance and as far as we are concerned. That is the humanitarian area where aid will go to, and that is where civilians will be able to go in order to receive that aid. Again, if that will be abused by Hamas, like so many other things are abused by Hamas, it won't be there.
Can you quantify exactly how much aid will be permitted to get through? When I heard 20 trucks, just as a layman, it didn't sound like a lot. Is there a specific window of time or an amount of aid that you can quantify or qualify for people listening tonight?
I don't have the details about how many trucks, and I don't know what they will have, what they will include. It appears that Gaza is running out of a lot of things, perhaps not rockets to fire at Israel, but they're running out of a lot of things.
Does that, because of the impact on the civilian population, make it incumbent that there be a window wide enough to actually bring in enough aid to impact for the civilians, specifically for the civilians, something more substantial?
Yeah, that will have to be negotiated between Israel and Egypt and coordinated. The directive has been given at the request of President Biden, and it will be implemented by the Israeli government. The cabinet has said so, and it will be implemented by the IDF. And once we will get the details, we will execute. Again, what we will be following very closely is to make sure that this indeed goes to those who are supposed to get it and not to Hamas.
Okay, Lieutenant Colonel Conricus, I appreciate your time this evening very much. Thank you.
Thank you.